Hello, everyone. This is the 198th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I interview Serbian podcaster Mr. Damir Bojić as we discuss the Yugoslavia National Team during the 1986 World Cup qualifiers. Mr. Bojić is on the Serbian podcast Na Ivici ofsajda on the Edge of Offside. Welcome back, Damir.
Hello, Sean. Really glad to be part of your show second time. So yeah, it's glad to be here, back here.
Thank you. So last time we left off at the end of the 1984 Euros, which were disastrous for Yugoslavia. So what was the state of the affairs with the Yugoslavia national team in the fall of 1984?
The atmosphere was really bad because the expectations before the competition were really high. And then there was this kind of a moment when you have this kind of brutal touch of reality, like three games, three losses, especially the one against Denmark was really heavy. And then it was like by the media, by the public, it was kind of accepted in this way. Most of the criticism went to the coach, the national team coach at that time, Toza Veselinovic. But I had the opportunity because, as you mentioned, my podcast, Naivity Offsajda, the last year I did some kind of a recap of the 40 years, like while following that current competition that was going on, the Euros. We also had the opportunity to talk with some of the footballers that were members of that national team. And I must say that none of them, maybe because it's like 40 years, they were young back then, but none of them had that kind of a bad memories about that. They did tell me that they didn't really see it as that big of a like that was like big debacle or some catastrophe or something like that. I remember that Ljubomir Radanovic, the one of the main reasons why we went to that Euros anyway, who scored that famous goal against Bulgaria, he told me like, look, we were like in the that would be like quarterfinals of Euros. So like I guess that's how also it can be perceived. Yes.
So naturally, there will be a new manager for Yugoslavia. So can you describe the trajectory of this new manager, Milos Milutinovic, as a player and a manager up to this point?
Milos Milutinovic was from that, let's say, that great period of Yugoslavian football, like 50s and 60s. He was one of the symbols of that team. He was a very famous footballer for Partizan. I know that people in Yugoslavia and Serbia that probably don't know is that Milos Milutinovic was the first player to score a goal in European Cup. That was against Sporting, like in the first game of the European Cup. And he was in the first edition of the European Cup, that's now called, of course, the Champions League. He was the best scorer. He was like a really prolific striker. He like scored really a lot of goals. As a player, he won two titles with Partizan, and also he participated in two World Cups, 1954 and following one, 1958. In these two World Cups, Yugoslavia reached second round both times. In both times, Yugoslavia lost to West Germany. In the 1958, I think that was his last game in the national team. But he was also respected as a coach. He had some trophies that he won with some Yugoslavian teams. He won trophy with Velez Mostar. He won a cup. They didn't like win the cup after that for a long, long time. Like a few years ago, they won a cup in Bosnia, which was like really nice thing to see because Velez Mostar was really loved the club. I think in Yugoslavia it was your second team because everybody liked that. And also he won the Balkans Cup with Velez, and he won title with Partizan in 1983, which was probably the main reason why he was expected. Like when he was announced as a coach of national team, it was well received by the media at that point.
And we should mention he was brother of Bora Milutinovic, coaching legend, as well as
Yeah,
Milorad
of course.
Milutinovic.
Yeah, of course. Boran Milutinovic was, of course, a legend when it comes to, as we can say, like Miloš Milutinovic is a legendary player and was well known for that. Boran Milutinovic is well known for his coaching, especially for national teams, because he has a world record, I guess,
Yeah.
like of how many times with a different national team he
Yeah.
was part of.
And at the
Of.
same time, he was the manager of Mexico while his brother was managing
Yeah,
Yugoslavia.
he was managing the host of the championship, so like.
What were the expectations for the 1986 World Cup qualifiers following the displays in the Euros?
Result with the Euros was not that well received by the public, and there was some kind of need for a change. The expectations are always high, so it was expected to be in one of the first two places, probably second place because France was in that group as well, and they were like the champions of the Europe that year when the qualification started. It was expected to just regain all that is left from the confidence and then just try to build something new. And it was expected to make some kind of a change with the generation. The thing I can also say, because it's kind of hard, there was some kind of a big generation swing in that sense, because Todor Veselinovic, the previous national team coach, had like 50 something players that he changed like
Right.
in those years for those quals and for the Euros. So basically, there aren't that many players left to choose from. It was expected to have some kind of fresh blood, some different approach, and Milutinovic already had some results, and he was well known. Now also for his coaching career, like two important results in the years before. So yeah, expectations were for Yugoslavia to participate in the World Cup, of course.
And we should mention that Yugoslavia were in a group with not only France, but with Bulgaria, East Germany, and Luxembourg. So perhaps there was a three-way race between Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, and East Germany for that second spot, perhaps.
Because it was the second time, like in a real short time period, to be in a group with Bulgaria. So, like we will talk about that later when it comes to the Bulgaria. But let's say that the Bulgarians were really motivated to play against Yugoslavia this time. So yeah.
Players like Safet Susic, who was still a star at Paris Saint-Germain, were to be discarded in this phase. Were these the scapegoats for the 1984 Euros, cases like him?
Of course, from the media, from the public, there was this kind of, yeah, maybe like Safet Sušić was probably considered as the scapegoat, but I just have to say that the main reason for that bad result was probably that rotation that I was talking about, like the constant changing of the team structure. That was the main reason. And so the main scapegoat would be the coach, Veselinovic. Telling like Safet Sušić was the problem. We just saw in these quals how it is to play without your best player, which this definitely was the case. Safet Sušić was the best player of Yugoslavian team at that point, and he didn't participate. And he was like 30 years old at that time, so that's the peak age. Okay, now with Modric and others, the peak age is probably somewhere afterwards, luckily for me. But the thing is, he was that period. That's kind of that mature age to be like a leader of the new generation that we could have seen only a couple of years later at the World Cup Yugoslavia in the 1990 with Ivica Osim as the coach and Safet Sušić as once again member of the team.
A bright young talent like Dragan Stojkovic would also be largely ignored in these qualifiers. Do you know if there was a specific reason why he was not given opportunities?
There is one objective reason that's not the fault of Miloš Milutinovic, and that's the military service. So Stojkovic was to do his military service that year. That's the main reason. He did participate like in 1-2 games, but when everything
Uh,
was already over, I think he had 2 games from the bench. He didn't even start. But that was the main reason. And it's also like really funny that story because the 1984 we had European Championship, but we have also the Olympics. And on those Olympics, Yugoslavia won the bronze medal. That coach at that time was always working with the Olympic team and the younger generations of Yugoslavian football, Toplak. Remember Radanovic, the player I mentioned before, like he also really talked about him in a positive way, in the way that was kind of there was a new team being built, and one of the important players of that new team was Stojkovic, as we could see years after. We'll talk about Toplak also afterwards. But yeah, the funny thing was that when they were like giving up the medals, Stojkovic and Katanec could not participate in that ceremony because they need to go back and start their military service. So the first game that he was back was the friendly against Austria and match against France for the bet. So yeah, those were the only two games.
Milos Milutinovic's first match in charge was a friendly in the beginning of the season, 1984-85, against Scotland, where at Glasgow, Yugoslavia would lose 6-1. In this match, you have the likes of Ranko Stojic, Davor Jozic, Fadil Vokri, Petar Georgievski, and Zoran Batrovic make their international debuts. And for Georgievski and Batrovic, it will be their one and only caps for the national team, while for the likes of Dragan Pantelic, Miodrag Jezic, and Vladimir Matjevic, it would be their final caps for Yugoslavia. First match, and it was like a continuation of the Euros and a heavy loss for Yugoslavia. A couple of weeks later, on September 29, at home at Belgrade, they faced Bulgaria. For this match, we have the following lineup: Ranko Stojic of Dinamo Zagreb, Zoran Vujovic of Hajduk Split. He'd be replaced by Nenad Grakan of Rijeka in the 36th minute. Mirsad Bajic of Zaleznikar, Ivan Gudel of Hajduk Split, Faruk Hadzibejic of Sarajevo, Lubomir Radanovic of Partizan, Blaz Sliskovic of Hajduk Split, Fadil Vokri of Pristina. He'd be replaced by Darko Panchev of Vardar in the 71st minute, Mehmet Bazdarovic of Zaleznikar, Milo Sestic, the captain of a team from Red Star, and Zlatko Vujovic of Hajduk Split. The match ends in a scoreless tie. Obviously, it's a drop point at home. Nevertheless, perhaps not conceding a goal at this point was a welcome news for Yugoslavia.
First, I'll start with the friendly against Scotland because that was like also a 6 goals loss. Like in the Euros, like one again in the Euros was very badly received. But that first match against Scotland, Yugoslavia led 1-0, but then received 6 goals. But we just have to be honest and say like that. For me, it's just as also a Liverpool fan, play against Kenny Dalglish and Souness in the 80s. I wouldn't expect much. They had a very strong team, but Yugoslavia was the lack of idea, lack of structure. Under Veselinovic, they were also shown once again in this match in Glasgow. Let's say that it was his first match. Okay, maybe this is not going to work that really well. We need to be really careful in these matches. And the match against Bulgaria was, but once again, there was this issue. It was a scoreless draw, and the thing that till the end, there was one thing that Milutinovic said, and he will keep saying this until the first loss, is like, at least we are not losing the games. Because Bulgaria was considered the biggest rival in this for that second place position, so it was expected to win that game and then kind of have this kind of huge pressure off your shoulders. But that didn't happen because we can say the biggest problems were probably in the midfield. And one of the reasons would be that Zoran Vujovic, the brother of Zlatko Vujovic, he was not playing his natural position. He was replacing, let's say, Gudel, who wasn't able to play that game. And it seemed also that Sliskovic, that was kind of becoming a part of this team, didn't have really strength for the 90 minutes football. In the first half, he was really good, and it was like it kind of seemed that his influence is really important for the game. But in the second half, he could not continue in the same tempo, same level. And one of the criticism was why was he not replaced at the halftime or sometimes at the halftime. And we can also say that also Safet Sušić started the season nice in PSG, so it was also like you could see what's missing in that team. Maybe yeah, that was also the way that this game was perceived.
The next qualifier was on October 20th at Leipzig against East Germany. Now, this match, Yugoslavia would win 3-2 away from home. Michael Glowacki had given East Germany the lead, but Mehmet Bazdarovic scored with a long-range shot in the 30th minute. And then right after halftime, Fadil Vokri gave Yugoslavia the lead. Although just 2 minutes later, East Germany tied the match through Rainer Ernst. The Yugoslavia would have to wait until the final 10 minutes when Milos Šestić scored the winner and gave Yugoslavia an important away win. Now, for this match, we have the following lineup: Stojić, Miodrag Radović of Partizan. This would be his second and final cap for Yugoslavia. Baljic, Velimir Zajic playing at Panathinaikos in Greece, captain of a team. Hadzibejic, Radanovic, Zlatko Vujovic, Gudelj, Vokri. He'd replaced by Stepan Deveric of Dinamo Zagreb in the 88th minute. Mehmet Bazdarovic, Sestic. He'd replaced by Davor Jozic in the 84th minute. And for Deveric as well, this was his sixth and final cap for Yugoslavia. His first cap had been in 1982. Important win to get their World Cup qualifiers on track at this point.
I think this was probably the best game that Yugoslavia played in these quals. I would say that just the team showed some character, let's put it that way, because East Germany led by a goal of Popovacki, and then Yugoslavia scored 2 goals, and all those goals were also like really, you mentioned Bazdarevic's goal, but also a goal of Fadio Vokri, because there was like some kind of a constant routine of Milos Šestić. He's dribbling, and then he passed the ball to Vokri, and then he scored. And in that moment, when he had a 2-1 lead, and then it was tied once again, and then Šestić scored that winner in the last minutes of the game. That kind of a win would give you hope. It seems that, as I said, team has character, and when it's hard, you can win, and that kind of brought some optimism to the squad and the perception of media. Of course, it seemed like, okay, maybe we have something to look for. And also, it was an away win against, as you said before, like Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and East Germany. Okay, East Germany is probably with the quality like expected to be like in the fourth position, but also like a good team. And so to win a game away in this way was really important. It was also important for the morale of the squad. Zajic played a really good game. It was one of his best performances for the national team. Also, one more thing for Zajic, he was the only player that played abroad from that. He was a captain, of course, but he's the only player who played abroad at that time.
The calendar year ended on a high note, at least for Yugoslavia, and they could look forward to the new year 1985. Before their next qualifier, there would be a few months in between. Yugoslavia would participate in the Nehru Cup in India with the likes of Soviet Union, Korea, and China, Iran, among others. They would reach the final. They would defeat Iran on January 20th. They would also defeat the Soviet Union on January 25th. They would defeat them 2-1. Later, they would tie with China 1-1 on January 29th, where the goalkeeper Ivan Pudar would make his international debut. In the semifinals on February 1st, they would defeat South Korea 3-1. This would be the final appearance of Zvonko Zivkovic, his fifth and final cap, first cap in 1982. But in the final, they would face the Soviets again, and they would lose this time, 2-1. So on February 4th, they lost 2-1 to the Soviet Union to finish second in the Nehru Cup. Next qualifier in this new year was on March 27th, 1985, at Zenica against Luxembourg. Now, bear in mind, they would have been expected to defeat Luxembourg with a heavy score to increase their goal difference. This match was on March 27th. Yugoslavia only managed a 1-0 win through a header by Ivan Gudelj in the 27th minute. For this match, we have the following lineup: Stojić, Zoran Vujovic, Baljic, Gudelj, Hadzibejic, Radanovic, Zlatko Vujovic captaining the side, Blaz Sliskovic, Milko Jurovski of Red Star, Bazdarovic, Predrag Pasic of Sarajevo, and he'd be replaced by Milos Šestić, who had joined Olympiacos in Greece in the 72nd minute. And For Pasic, this was his 10th and final cap for Yugoslavia. His first cap had been in 1981. So, all in all, despite the win, it was an opportunity lost for Yugoslavia.
Yes, it was perceived in that way because in that time, a lot of these, let's say, like low-level national team, like the European teams, they were really amateur squad. So it's always expected to win those matches by a big difference. At the end of 1984, and then for the Nehru Cup, okay, was not that attractive competition in the sense of the teams that were part of it. Like the strongest teams were Yugoslavia and Soviet Union. But you know how it's hard to win like two games against the same team in the one competition. We can ask Portugal for that. But the thing is that that first win against Soviet Union was really well received because it was the first win after the win like 30 something years after the win of the Olympics against Soviet Union. So yeah, I think the general mood was positive. And in that cup, in this game against Luxembourg, we saw one player was back, but unfortunately only just for that game. That was Predrag Pasic. I'm not that objective when it comes to Predrag Pasic because I think he's a great guy, great person. I don't know if you know his story about the things that he did during the war in Sarajevo, the school he organized for kids that were living under occupation. Eric Cantona did his special about it, and there is also a story about Predrag Pasic. I had the opportunity to talk with him, of course, about when we were talking about the World Cup 1982, and Pasic was expected to participate there, and he didn't. Unfortunately, this was his last match in the national team, which was really unfortunate because that season he won the title with Sarajevo, and he was also the best player of the league. So if you take it like that, you have a best player of the national team who's not part of the squad, and you have best player of the league probably who is not also playing the best season in the league. Let's say it like that. He's not also part of the team. So that's kind of a strange thing. For the Luxembourg, Zajec was not part of the team. So one of the things they said, like he was missing and he was like the motor of the squad, which was not that really, because it was expected to win by a high margin. That's definite. And the end of the game in Zenica, there was the final whistle. You could see the players from Luxembourg celebrating that they lost only 1-0.
The next match, just I guess a week later, yeah, would be at home against France. France of Michel Platini, who had defeated Yugoslavia 3-2 in 1984 Euros. Again, a lot of familiar faces: Jean Tigana, Luis Fernandez, among others. Alain Giresse for a strong French team, but playing away from home at Sarajevo. This match ended as a scoreless tie. Again, it was a drop point at home, but again, it was against such a strong opponent. Maybe it would have been seen in a positive light. Now, for this match, we have the following lineup: Stojic, Vlado Kaplic of Zaleznikar, Balic, Gudelj, Hadzibejic, Radanovic, Zlatko Vujovic. He'd be replaced by Milko Jurovski in the 63rd minute. Zajic, Vahid Halilhodzic, playing in Nantes in France, who was recalled for the first time since the 1982 World Cup. Only, I imagine, because they were playing against France. In any case, this would be his 15th and final cap for Yugoslavia. His first cap had been in 1976. You have Bazdarovic, Sestic, and Sestic would be replaced by Sliskovic in the 67th minute. And for Sestic, this was his 21st and final cap for Yugoslavia. His first cap had been in 1979. And in this match, we should mention that the match was held up for like 10 minutes after some floodlights failure. Match ended as a scoreless tie that in the end benefited France, but at the time it seemed like to be a diplomatic tie for both teams.
Yeah, we can say it like that because France started the quals in an expected way. Yugoslavia didn't start it that way. So, let's say, in a case of a loss, Yugoslavia would have much more to lose in that. It would be much more harder to regain all those lost points. This game was played in Sarajevo, Koševo, the stadium of Sarajevo. I think also it's interesting to say there was like 4 players from city of Sarajevo at that time, like more from Željezničar than Sarajevo. But yeah, as I said before, there was not the best one from Sarajevo was not there. There was also that kind of a pressure to include some foreign players that play in the foreign leagues or play abroad. One of the reasons that we could say that Halihodzic was part of that team was because he was playing in the French league. And at that time, he was playing a really good season.
Yeah, he ended up
For
as top goal scorer.
Yeah, it's expected to have him as a part of the team. But when we look at the game, we can say that both teams were like really, really careful, and they didn't really give it up that much. So they were like, let's say, well, probably both satisfied with the draw. One thing that we should take in account is just the number of points you get for a win. And of course, back then, for a win, you would get 2 points. So it's not like nowadays 3 points. So if you draw one game, it's just like so two draws, one win. So basically, it's not that big of a loss. I think that was also taken into account. And after the game, with the comments from the media was satisfied that we didn't lose. But okay, France was the champions of Europe at that time, and we remember how was the last game that these two teams played, how did it finish. And finally, one game that Platini didn't score against Yugoslavia. For the players, everybody was left some kind of a, I don't know, mild performance. Milutinovic did praise performance of Halihodzic, but I think that was also done to spite the media a bit because of that constant pressure and some kind of negative criticism towards him. Basically, as you said, that was the last game of Halihodzic players, and they're playing their last game. When you take likes of Halihodzic or Pasic, like those really important players, and you're not counting on them. Also, Šestić, of course, who was the legend of Red Star and afterwards Vojvodina, the club from my town. We can perceive like that kind of a scapegoat thing. Like if you are not counting on Šestić for the rest of quals, that probably means the reason why it's not working well, like that Šestić is not fitting in that squad, maybe. But we'll see the results of that afterwards, of course.
About a month later, on May 1st, they travel to Luxembourg, who had defeated 1-0 just over a month before. This match, again, Yugoslavia would have expected to score a lot of goals, but they had to wait until the penultimate minute in the 89th minute when Vokri scored a winner. So again, very poor result for Yugoslavia despite the win. For this match, we have Stojić, Branko Miljuš of Hajduk Split, Baljic, Gudel, Hadzibejic, Radanovic. He'd be replaced by Milko Jurovski in the 46th minute. Zlatko Vujovic, he'd replaced by Darko Panchev in the 46th minute. Zajic, captain of the team. Vokri Bazdarovic, and Marko Milnaric of Dinamo Zagreb. So a win, but they should have done better.
Just like the first game. So it's just basically the performance was more or less the same. Only we can say that, yeah, there were more chances and more shots on the goal and everything. And to be perfectly honest, the goalkeeper of Luxembourg won
Reiswijk.
probably the game of his career. I don't know. But as Roy Keane would say, it was his job. But the thing is, in this game, we had Zayat. Zayat played because it was like said, because the previous game didn't have Zayat. He's one of the most important ones. He's like the motor of the team. He was here now, but he didn't participate. And also, Vujovic was not that good in this match. He didn't have a good performance, so he was changed at the halftime with Jurovski. And the thing is, in the media, there were comments about that substitute because people are thinking that maybe now he's going out for Zlatko Vujovic. But who knows, Zlatko Vujovic, he's never going. Like, he's a member of the national team. He's one of the most reliable players of the national team. And I remember like Ivica Osip talking about him. He's the guy that you can count on. And that's why like every national coach loved to have Zlatko Vujovic in his team. But when we talk about, okay, it was a low margin win, of course. And it happened the second time, of course, and it's very bad for the goal difference, who might end up to be important at the end. That's also. But the thing is if you score that happened, this was the second time. If you score a goal that late in the game, like in the 90th minute or something like the 89th minute, kind of a feeling of it's important for the morale of the character of the squad, because in that way, okay, we are winners. We're gonna do this. We are winning this thing. And yeah, you always have these kind of matches in qualifications. That's normal. Bad thing is like it happened the second time. So there was not much pace for the rest of the calls for this, as we could have seen.
Yugoslavia ended the season a month later on June 1st. This next qualifier was against Bulgaria at Sofia at Vasilevsky. As Yugoslavia were struggling to defeat Luxembourg, on the following day, Bulgaria had defeated France 2-0 to have a good chance to qualify for the World Cup. So, in some ways, this matchup against Yugoslavia, a win for Bulgaria would place them in a very good position to qualify for the World Cup. For this match, we have the following lineup: Stojić, Kaplic, Radanovic, Gudel, Zajic, Hadzibejic, Edin Bahtic. This would be his second and final cap for Yugoslavia. First cap in 1984. He's from Zaleznikar. He'll be replaced by Mitar Merkela from Red Star in the 35th minute. Milnaric, Vokri, Bazdarovic, and Milko Jurovski. This match, Yugoslavia would lose for the first time in this group. In the 27th minute, Plamen Getov scored from a free kick for Bulgaria. But 2 minutes later, Jurovski tied the match for Yugoslavia. But in the second half, in the 57th minute, Getov again scored for Bulgaria, and Bulgaria won 2-1, and now they were in a good position to qualify for the World Cup. The season ended on a low note for Yugoslavia. They still had two more qualifiers left, but this kind of derailed their plans in a way.
Yeah, it definitely did. You can perceive that this match as some kind of revenge for the previous match that these two teams played in the quals of for a European Cup, when Yugoslavia scored like so late in the game. It was like definitely the last attack when Radanovic scored. And it was that kind of a win was really important for the team and for the expectation from that Euros. But the Bulgarians did not forget that, definitely. And they were like really highly motivated to play against Yugoslavia. So that's for sure. And it was a well-deserved win. That's definitely. We can say in this game, there was some decisions that kind of didn't play out that well. It seemed that Getov, who scored like 2 goals, he had a lot of space in defense. And this was the first time because, as we can say for Yugoslavia, the games before, in the defense line, it played pretty much stable. I didn't see that many goals, and it kind of seemed like pretty strict. And it seemed that it can like something you can count on. But in this game, it didn't really seem like that. There were some decisions such as playing Radanovic, who is central defender, to play him at the position of a side back or wing back. It was not that good of a decision. And also there was a big pressure on Milutinovic for the goalkeeper. And I think that kind of who should be the goalkeeper for this game, because Ljukovcan was playing a really, really good season, and he ended up being called for this game. And there are talks, I don't know, that Stojić didn't really enjoy that fact, and that he was, I don't know if there were talks, I cannot really count it and say that's just like that he really insisted that he plays this game. And I think it was felt that he was under a big pressure and that he was nervous in this match, and you could have seen that. And we'll just see in the next of the following the quals who would be the first goalkeeper for the Yugoslavian win. As I said it before, that Milutinovic said that at least we are not losing points. Yeah, this was the game where we lost points. That was definitely the end of the quals. It was perceived like that.
Perhaps it was seen as their last chance because for their next qualifier in the following season, 85-86 season, the first one is at home on September 28th against East Germany at Belgrade at the Partizan Stadion. And Milos Milutinovic uses this match to make some experimentations. For this match, we have Zivan Ljokan, who you mentioned from Red Star, making his international debut in goal. We have Nenad Grakan of Rijeka, Mizra Kapetanovic of Sarajevo. Gudel, he'll be replaced by Kaplic in the 62nd minute. Marko Elsner of Red Star. Radanovic. Jovica Nikolic making his international debut from Red Star. He'll be replaced by Milko Jurovski in the 46th minute. Haris Skoro making his international debut from Zaleznikar. Milos Bursac from Sutsjeka Nikšić making his international debut. Bazdarovic and Zlatko Vujovic captaining the team. For the likes of Milko Jurovski, this was his sixth and final cap for Yugoslavia. Kaplic as well, this was his fourth and final cap. Both of them made their debuts in 1984. And we already mentioned Ljokan, Bursac, and Skoro made their international debuts. And for Jovica Nikolic, this was his one and only cap for Yugoslavia. This match at home, Yugoslavia would lose 2-1. Andreas Thom scored twice for East Germany in the 47th minute and the 59th minute. In the 83rd minute, international debutant Haris Skoro scored Yugoslavia's goal, but the team lost at home, second consecutive loss, this time at home. And you can see that the wheels are coming off as far as any hopes they have for this group.
Yeah, we can say it like that because this decision to have four players who played their debuts in a competitive match, we can say that there was still theoretical chance for Yugoslavia to be part of the, to reach that second position at least. There was talks with the Bulgarian manager after the game with Bulgaria. He was totally convinced that they're going to win against France. And that France is not that good. But it was in Bulgaria. Bulgarian media saw that match after they won against Yugoslavia that the quals are done because they only needed 2 points in two games. One was against Luxembourg. In this match, we could have seen all this kind of. It's not just the case of bringing when you look at this first team in the previous the game, and then this game you had 8 new players, the first 11, 8 new players. That's kind of a big of a change. And it seemed that there was no idea. It's okay to make some kind of big drastical changes, and it's games like this. It's always fear, but to just do it for the sake of doing it, it's never good, as we could have seen here. And we could have seen some things there was this tight structure, discipline that was said that Milutinovic had with the national team. We could have seen that it didn't really work that way. And it was always comments about this game. One of the biggest things in the media was Milutinovic smoked, I think, 11, 12 cigars during this game. And this was the thing, he was just sitting in the bench and smoking nervously, and that was kind of one of the highlights of the game for the media. But the thing is, the critics were going all over, so many new players. The penalty, there was a penalty at the end of the game that Gračan missed. Why didn't Vujović take that penalty? Why was it Gračan? Why didn't Stojković get a chance because he could play now? And then also from the players as well, we mentioned that Jurovski's last game, maybe one of the reasons for that was after the game, he said we should have played with 3 forwards this game. And also Radanovic, I remember talking with Radanovic about the Euros and Todor Veselinovic, and I'm just talking about the criticism that he received. But Radanovic was never like that. He said he was a good coach, and that was never a problem him, that coach. And also after this game, it was clear that Yugoslavia is definitely out. He said that there are some other problems. It's not Milos Milutinovic. He's not the problem. There is something else, but he didn't say what. So yes, this was definitely the end of these qualifications, and it was just kind of seeing that this World Cup Yugoslavia will miss, and it was clear that probably they will need a new coach. From the media, that was expected.
And they still had one more match against France in November. But before this match against France, there was a friendly against Austria played at Linz on October 16th that Yugoslavia would win 3-0. Zlatko Vujovic would score twice and Merkela would score the other. Now, for this match, the likes of Vladimir Vermezovic of Partizan and Goran Stefanovic of Partizan made their international debuts. For Stevanovic, this would be his one and only cap. And also in this match, Velimir Zajic played his last match for Yugoslavia. His 36th cap. His first cap had been in 1977. So we come to the final qualifier. It's on November 16th at Paris that France has to win to qualify. And France would win. Michel Platini would score twice. His first one on the third minute was from a free kick. He scored the second in the 71st minute. Near the end, France's Yvan Leroux was sent off for some anxious minutes for France, but France won and qualified. But Yugoslavia, I imagine, were already out in their mind. So in this match, you have the following lineup in the final match of Milos Milutinovic. You have Stojic, Milius, Kapetanovic, Gudel, Vermezovic of Partizan. This was the second and final cap. Radanovic, Dragan Stojkovic of Radniki Nis, playing his first match in these qualifiers. He'll be replaced by Skoro in the 46th minute. Sliskovic, Milos Bursac. This would be his second and final cap for Yugoslavia. Bazdarovic, Zlatko Vujovic, captain of the team. And we should mention that Radanovic was also sent off in this match in the 82nd minute. And for Kapetanovic, this was his sixth and final cap for Yugoslavia, first cap in 1983. So Yugoslavia lost, and this was their third straight loss in these qualifiers. The qualification campaign ended in such a negative note, and it seemed like it was like a continuation of the Euros. The disappointment of the Euros kind of continued over into these qualifiers. Yugoslavia failed to qualify.
Yes, this was kind of, if we have that kind of a curve, like the Yugoslavia in 1982, how it played, and then it was even worse 1984, and then like it didn't manage to qualify for the World Cup 1986. So yeah, it seems that it's going downwards. Yeah, it was very pessimistic views about that. The interesting thing is that game against France was perceived like the media, like against East Germany, like the two best games of Yugoslavian team. Even they lost 2-0, but they kind of played a good game. Okay, maybe there was not that big of a stress. Everything was known already. Yugoslavia is out, Milutinovic is out. Everything is just like a farewell situation. And we can say that also that we had Sliskovic was probably one of the best players in the match. This was his first game after that previous match with France. Yeah, he was also the one who was not part of all these matches in between. So there are like, when you talk about players who didn't play, it's just like a long list of those players. The players, like I think all the ex-Yugoslav teams would like to have those kind of reserves in their national teams, which is not that big of a problem if you have results. But when you don't have results, then the pressure is even higher, and the reasons are all there. So let's say like that there was this pessimistic way. There was once again this kind of a moment of facing the reality. Where is Yugoslavian football at that point? Just thinking about who will be the new coach, what to do afterwards.
Were there any demands from the media to include foreign-based players at this time?
Yes, there was. We can say that, I don't know, there was this kind of a demand because it was like, it's not fair, because we mentioned that before, but the rule was in Yugoslavian football that till the age of 28, you need to play in Yugoslavian league. After that age, you can maybe 1 year earlier if you do your military service earlier. But the thing is, it kind of ended up like that. That was the reason why Yugoslavian league was strong. But also was reason why Yugoslavian footballers maybe didn't have that much of a more competitive leagues to participate in. So maybe for their experience, whatever, that could be really worthy. But other than those players that we mentioned before, like Halihodzic and Sušić, like in this class, there are two players that played in foreign leagues.
Nenad Stojkovic was doing well at Monaco.
That's the thing, like there aren't that many other players because say like we have only two that did participate in this class. That was Zajic, who was the captain, of course, the team playing at Panathinaikos, and there was Halihodzic in front. But there is only just one main one, that's of course Safet Sušić. But I think that's enough, like he's your best player. Like if you don't have him, yeah. But when you think about, I don't know, like you mentioned Stojkovic, but I don't really know that who would make that kind of a big impact on the team. So for me, it's just like all the players that already didn't play the national team, who said like Vladimir Petrovic Pijon or Ivica Šurjak, the players from before, who were still like in that kind of an age. Of course, Petrovic was like only 30 or something like that. So basically, they could still participate, but they were not playing that best. They were not playing at that higher level, and in those leagues, they were not that competitive, even maybe less competitive than the Yugoslavian league. The main lead pressure was for Sušić and Halihodzic. That would be for me, and I think that would be enough if you have two of them in these qualifications. But Sušić definitely would make an impact on the squad. But also, just to say, like with Sušić, is also like a lot of players of that generation and later generation consider Sušić maybe the best player ever to play in Yugoslavia. One of the best Yugoslavian players, for some of them, like the best player of the generation, definitely, but for some of them, like the best player ever. But there is like this kind of criticism, like in 1982 and 1984, Sušić didn't really show all that, didn't really give that much to the team. It was maybe expected. Mainly the reason was probably with the coaches, with, I don't know, Miljanic, Veselinovic didn't know how to use it. And that was kind of maybe this kind of a break was fair to make it, just kind of let's try without him and see, maybe he's not, sometimes you have that, like if you play without your best player, the team kind of works better, everything comes, but the definite thing, it was quite the opposite. We didn't even reach the competition.
So after 40 years, what's the consensus on how Milos Milutinovic handled these qualifiers?
Yeah, it was definitely like the big failure. If we would say that we just like go like from we start like from the 80s. If you have a World Cup 1982, Yugoslavia was one of the, as it was perceived, not in just Yugoslavian media, like in also in the world media. Yugoslavia is for that World Cup in 1982 was perceived like one of the like hidden favorites, just somebody who maybe could make some kind of a big result, and it was considered like one of the best. Remember that Yugoslavia in that group was in the qualifications group was just above Italy, who ended up winning the competition. And then you have 1984 that also Yugoslavia is expected, of course, after that win against Bulgaria, was expected to make some kind of an impact, but it didn't. It was just complete failure, 3 losses. And then it's just like now this gradual fall. I think the biggest thing that everybody was kind of saying in Latino is the biggest disappointment was that, because we had with Veselinovic the thing that he was always changing the players. It was really, we didn't have like a clear idea what was the idea of the team and also the strategy, the tactics. And it was expected that Milutinovic will change that. But as we couldn't see it for quals and the games we discussed, we have also the same problem. Maybe he didn't include that many players, but it was just often if it happened that he would bring a important player, and he would play one game and he didn't count on them. That happened with Pasic and Halihodzic, and it's not really a thing that you do. But Milutinovic is, of course, well perceived especially from the fans of Partizan. It's like one of the great, but as I said, primarily for his player skills as a player, which he was really good. But as a coach, to be fair, he liked to win one Yugoslavian Cup, one Yugoslavian title. That means that you did make some kind of you could say that you can be considered as a good coach, which in those two clubs in 2 seasons he definitely was.
In closing, at this point, how did the future look in terms of future qualifications? And of course, a new manager was needed, and I imagine new set of players were required at this point. What was the outlook at this point for the future?
The outlook at that point was the future did seem, if not bad, then blurry. It was kind of what can we expect from now. It was expected the new manager, whoever would it be, like the new coach, the pressure would be even higher. Those are the things like you would put like that a popular figure as Veselinovic and Milutinovic definitely were. And, like in that kind of and you expect like that kind of pressure would just kind of, they could take that pressure more than the players, but it ended up that not that good of a thing. And it's also like if you each qualifications have like that cycles from the quals and then competition, and each time you change the manager. That's not saying that you have a clear idea what do you want to do, and you are not making the team for the future, like to make some kind of a nice solid structure, and then the players would fit in it. But you are always mixing something and expecting more. But I think that the one good thing came out of this. I mentioned Toplak before, because after these qualifications, there was no a new national coach for a year, but 1 year, Toplak and Ivica Osim, they worked together as some kind of a co-managers, co-coaches. So it was this kind of a status. I think it was done intentionally. Some say that I think when I talked, Radanovic was discussing this, but it was like that this thing was done nicely and he said like that was the idea of Miljanic, to just work on the building of a team and to kind of like set a goal, and to I think Miljanic maybe set that goal earlier, to have like Yugoslavia as the winner of the, I don't know, having some huge result at the World Cup in 1990. And to do that, you need to kind of build it. And maybe on the surface, it didn't really look like this, but maybe if you see like always changing, bringing up new players, Toplak, as I mentioned before, he was the coach of the Olympic team. So 1984, they won a bronze medal. In 1980, there was semi-final. So once again, like a good result. In the Olympics back then, they were also, there was this rule of free older players, but the players that did participate that were really the best you can give. So imagine now having like the best under 23 players and then adding three more experience. So that there was this kind of a way. There was Toplak who knew those guys, who worked with them, who like saw their gradual progress, and there was Ivica Osim, who is considered, as for my show, like one of the we have like the three best coaches ever, and Ivica Osim is definitely one of them, if not the one, but the most loved definitely. Ivica Osim had his results as manager, the coach of Željezničar, because Željezničar had this significant campaign in UEFA Cup and tragic loss in the semifinals against Videoton. But it was Ivica Osim. It seemed like there was like some kind of a progress in his coaching, and it seemed like he will become that he is already, and he could be a man for some higher, bigger plan. And I think that the idea for that was 1990. And the Yugoslavia didn't qualify for the Euros 1988, but Yugoslavia did participate in the World Cup 1990. Made a big result, but lost on penalties against Argentina. But it could have won, so it could have been in the semifinals. So I think that a blurry kind of a picture of the future and worrying. But at this point, I think there was something was being dealt with. 1 year you had two like this co-coaching thing, and then afterwards Osim gradually building the team that would participate in the World Cup in 1990.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this interview. All our contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads, as well as the link to your podcast. So, Damir, thank you once again, and hope to continue these discussions on Yugoslav football history.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure to participate in your podcast. I really admire the thing you are doing. And of course, it's always for me to talk about Yugoslavian football. That's one of the things that I really liked most.
Thank you. Appreciate it.